Welcome, everyone. Today's explainer explores a totally fascinating, but honestly a pretty heartbreaking intersection of human behavior and market forces. We're going to take a deep dive into how a deeply private, emotional void has scaled up into a massive, formalized economic engine in Japan. We're talking about the economics of loneliness. And look, this isn't just some unique cultural quirk we're looking at. It's a stunning case study of what actually happens when basic psychological needs go unmet on a national scale, and how modern capitalism just steps right in to offer a structured, transactional fix. It's a really compelling look at the absolute limits of human connection once it becomes a commodified product. Let's get into it.
50%. Yeah, you heard that right. According to the data driving our analysis today, half of Japanese husbands are entirely cut off in the bedroom. Now, I really want us to pause and just internalize the demographic weight of that figure for a second. We are not talking about some fringe issue here or a tiny pocket of unhappy couples. We're talking about half of the married men in this demographic navigating a daily existence totally devoid of romantic intimacy with their spouses. And this isn't just a passing marital slump, you know? For a lot of them, it's a permanent state of affairs. This sets up the intimate, deeply human problem at the very root of today's explainer. When you have 50% of a population collectively starving for affection, for validation, for intimacy, well, it creates a psychological vacuum so immense that it practically demands an economic response.
So let's unpack how this starts in Section 1, the bedroom disconnect, or going home to a roommate.
To really grasp the scale of this industry, we first have to understand the profound psychological friction these men are facing every single day right around 5 p.m. when work ends. Theoretically, going home should mean returning to a warm, connected sanctuary, right? But because of that 50% statistic we just talked about, going home doesn't offer warmth. It literally means going home to a roommate. All the intimacy is just gone. Just imagine the sterile reality of returning, night after night, to an environment where you feel totally invisible, where the person you share your life with feels more like a platonic acquaintance. That quiet agony creates a huge critical juncture. Because of that dread waiting for them, a massive portion of these men actively choose not to go straight home after work. The physical closeness to their spouse actually just amplifies their emotional isolation. So instead, they seek out environments where they can escape that silence. They go looking for places where they can actually feel visible, validated, and above all else wanted.
Which brings us to Section 2, buying after-hours connection through the Hostess Club solution.
Okay, so where exactly are they going to escape that domestic silence? They're heading straight into Japan's incredibly intricate network of hostess clubs and bars. But to really get this, we've got to look past the flashing neon signs and break down the exact anatomy of the transaction happening inside. Young women are being paid to perform highly specific, curated actions. They pour their drinks, they laugh at their stories, and they make them feel fundamentally desired. We are looking at the literal, direct commodification of emotional connection. You might wonder, why pay someone just to pour a drink or listen to some mundane story about your workday? Well, it's because these actions flawlessly mimic the traditional, idealized domestic intimacy that these men have completely lost. And honestly, because it's a financial transaction, it's safe. There's zero risk of rejection. If a guy tries to connect in a marriage that's gone cold, he might face a really painful rebuff. But here, the validation is 100% guaranteed. These men are purchasing an emotional sanctuary, paying top dollar for the exact feeling of being appreciated that is totally missing from their real lives.
Let's see how deep this goes in Section 3, the Dohan date system, extending the illusion.
So the crazy thing we hit next is that human psychology is incredibly complex. For a lot of these men, just sitting in a club for a couple of hours simply isn't enough to fill that void anymore. The club is, by its very nature, an artificial environment, right? The transactional boundary is super obvious. They want something that feels a bit more authentic, and that brings us to a formalized system known as dohan, or shucking. This is where a man pays a premium, a flat-out extra fee directly to the club just for the privilege of going on a full date with the hostess before her actual work shift even begins. This is where the financial and emotional investment absolutely skyrockets. By moving the interaction out of the club and into the daylight, the transactional connection gets disguised. It allows the client to completely suspend his disbelief and blur the lines between a paid service and a genuine romantic relationship.
Let's walk through how this actually plays out because it's completely seamless. The evening starts way before the neon lights of the club even turn on. The man meets the hostess out in the real world. They'll go to a nice restaurant for dinner, maybe they'll go shopping, strolling around the district just like any other ordinary couple out on a date. They are perfectly simulating a very real, very genuine romantic evening, and sharing this experience outside the club walls builds a narrative of authentic connection in his mind. Then, as the evening goes on, they transition together into the club for the start of her shift. But see, because they've just shared this elaborate pre-shift experience, the psychology of the man is totally shifted. He isn't just some random customer walking in off the street paying for an hour of small talk. He's successfully extended the illusion. He's anchored himself to her through a shared real-world experience, basically locking in an entire evening of continuous, uninterrupted validation.
Now let's zoom out to look at the big picture in Section 4, a $24 billion industry, the macroeconomics of longing.
Okay, I want you to take a second and just let the sheer massive scale of this number sink in. $24 billion. That is the staggering, mind-blowing macroeconomic reality of this hyper-localized solution. To put that into perspective, an industry of that size rivals the gross domestic product of entire small nations. It outpaces massive global tech sectors and traditional manufacturing industries. But this isn't built on exporting electronics or building cars. When you take that 50% of husbands who feel entirely disconnected in their own homes, and you multiply that quiet desperation by the drinks poured, the stories laughed out, the expensive dinners, the shopping trips, and those premium fees of the Dohan dates, it creates an absolute economic juggernaut. It is literally a master class in how market forces will always rise to meet a demand, even if that demand is something as abstract and intangible as human affection.
And this thought elegantly synthesizes everything we've unpacked today. Japan built a $24 billion industry around men who go home to a roommate. It's just a perfect bridge from the massive macroeconomic scale we just discussed right back down to the intimate, melancholic human longing we started with. It's so absolutely crucial to understand that we are not analyzing a traditional red light district here. We are analyzing an emotional sanctuary industry. The driving force behind this multi-billion-dollar economic engine is profound, quiet loneliness. It's just the simple, universal human desire to be seen, to be heard, and to be wanted. The market has simply recognized that a man who feels totally invisible in his own living room is willing to spend almost anything to feel like he matters somewhere else. Which leaves us with a final, really profound question to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. Can a $24 billion industry truly replace the feeling of being wanted at home? It really forces us to examine the absolute limits of transactional connection. You can buy the expensive dinner, you can pay a premium for the shopping trip, and you can absolutely purchase the laughter and the poured drinks. But does the transaction ever actually cure the emotional deficit? Or does it merely anesthetize the pain for a few hours before these men inevitably have to walk back through their front doors, returning once again to the silent reality of a roommate? It's a fascinating, deeply complex reality of modern human psychology. Thank you so much for joining me to break this all down today. Keep learning, keep questioning the systems around you, and I will see you in the next explainer.